The crosshairs settled on the target's forehead with surgical precision. Maya Chen's breathing slowed to almost nothing as her finger found the trigger's sweet spot. That perfect balance point where the slightest pressure would send death screaming across 800 meters of empty space. "Tango down," she whispered into her comm, watching through her scope as the enemy sniper's head snapped back in a crimson mist. The body toppled from the minaret, tumbling through the dusty Afghan air like a broken marionette. "Nice shot, Ghost," came the gravelly voice of Sergeant Rodriguez through her earpiece. "That's number 147. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as the significance hit her. 147 confirmed kills. Not a single miss in 8 months of deployment. She'd just broken the record that had stood unchallenged for 30 years. A record held by her own father, Staff Sergeant Maya Chen, before an IED had claimed his life in these same mountains when she was 12. But instead of celebration, Maya felt only the familiar weight of expectation crushing down on her shoulders. Back at Camp Leatherneck, Colonel Harrison would be updating her file, adding another notch to a reputation that seemed to grow more impossible with each mission. The whispers had already started months ago. "She's not human. It's like she was born for this. Ghost never misses." If only they knew the truth. If only they understood that every perfect shot was built on a foundation of desperate, clawing terror. Terror that one day she'd prove them all right, that she really was nothing more than the scared little girl who'd needed training wheels until she was 10 because her hands shook too badly to balance a bicycle. The memory surfaced unbidden, as it always did in these moments of triumph. Maya, at 8 years old, her father's patient voice echoing across the backyard shooting range he'd built behind their modest base housing. "Breathe, sweetheart. Feel the rhythm of your heartbeat." The shot comes between beats, in that perfect moment of stillness. She'd missed 37 targets in a row that first day, tears streaming down her face as neighborhood kids laughed from the fence line. "She needs training wheels for her gun, too," little Tommy Morrison had shouted, and the nickname had stuck through elementary school, through middle school, through the first humiliating months of high school ROTC. Maya blinked away the memory and began breaking down her rifle with the same methodical precision that had made her legendary. Every movement was automatic, muscle memory honed through 10,000 hours of practice. The Barrett M82A1 came apart in her hands like familiar puzzle pieces. Bolt, barrel, scope, stock, each component secured in its custom foam-lined case. "Ghost, we've got movement on the eastern approach," Rodriguez's voice crackled through the static. "Multiple tangos. Looks like they're trying to flank Bravo team." Maya was already moving before he finished speaking, flowing like liquid shadow across the rocky outcropping. Her spotter, Corporal Jake Eyes Morrison, ironically the same Tommy Morrison who'd tormented her in childhood, though he'd grown into a decent man and soldier, kept pace beside her, his own equipment secured with practiced efficiency. "Range to target?" Maya asked as they settled into their new position. 1,200 meters, Eyes reported, his binoculars tracking the approaching enemy fighters. "Winds picking up from the southwest, maybe 8 knots. You've got a clear line of sight on the lead element." Maya felt the familiar calm descend over her like a warm blanket. This was her element, her sacred space where doubt and fear couldn't touch her. Through her scope, the world telescoped down to a circle of perfect clarity. She could see the enemy soldiers picking their way through the boulder field, their movements confident but careless. They thought they held the tactical advantage. They were wrong. The first shot took the squad leader's center mass, dropping him behind cover. The second shot found the radio man before he could call for support. Maya's bolt worked with mechanical precision, ejecting spent brass and chambering fresh rounds in a rhythm as steady as a metronome. "Tango down! Tango down!" Her voice was emotionless, professional. Multiple tangos in the open. But even as her rifle sang its deadly song, Maya's mind wandered to the letter she'd written the night before. The letter that still sat unsealed in her footlocker back at base. The letter that would explain everything if she ever found the courage to send it. "Dear Dad," it began, "today I broke your record. 147 confirmed kills without a miss. I know you'd be proud, but I also know you'd understand why it doesn't feel like victory. You always said that being a sniper wasn't about the killing. It was about protecting the people who couldn't protect themselves. I think I'm finally starting to understand what you meant. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, I want to take a moment to thank you for watching. Creating and narrating these detailed, novel-length stories takes tremendous time and research to bring you the most engaging content possible. We're embarking on a journey of nearly 50,000 words together. That's a full novella. If you're already hooked by what you've heard, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this story with someone who would enjoy it, and subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest stories. This is going to be an epic adventure, so get comfortable, and let's continue with this remarkable tale. The story began 18 months earlier, when Staff Sergeant Maya Chen had first stepped off the transport plane at Camp Leatherneck, Afghanistan. The July heat hit her like a physical blow, dry and merciless, carrying with it the sense of diesel fuel, concrete dust, and something indefinable that every veteran recognized as the smell of war. Maya had tried to project confidence as she shouldered her gear and walked across the tarmac, but inside her stomach churned with familiar anxiety. At 26, she was already one of the Marine Corps' most accomplished marksmen, having graduated top of her class from the Scout Sniper School at Quantico. Her service record was pristine, her test scores were off the charts, and her instructors had written glowing recommendations. None of that seemed to matter when she reported to Major Sarah Williams, the commanding officer of the 3rd Battalion Sniper Section. Williams was a compact woman in her early 40s, her sun-weathered face bearing the kind of lines that came from squinting through rifle scopes in desert sunshine. She looked up from Maya's file with an expression that mixed skepticism with barely concealed frustration. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Williams said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I'll be honest with you. I didn't ask for a fresh sniper, especially not one straight out of stateside training. My teams have been working together for months, and cohesion is everything in this business." Maya stood at attention, fighting the urge to fidget under Williams' scrutiny. "Yes, ma'am, I understand, ma'am." "Do you?" Williams stood up, walking around her desk to face Maya directly. "Because what I see in your file is a lot of impressive test scores and very little actual combat experience." "Shooting paper targets and shooting human beings are two entirely different things, Chen. Out here, hesitation gets people killed. Overconfidence gets even more people killed." The criticism stung, but Maya had heard variations of it her entire military career. She was too young, too inexperienced, too much of an unknown quantity. The fact that she was also one of the few women in the Marine Corps sniper program only added another layer of doubt from skeptical commanders. "I'm ready for this deployment, ma'am," Maya said, though even as the words left her mouth, she wondered if they were true. Williams studied her for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "We'll see. You'll be partnered with Corporal Morrison as your spotter. He's been here for 6 months and knows the terrain. More importantly, he knows how to keep snipers alive. I suggest you listen to everything he tells you." Maya's heart nearly stopped when she heard the name Morrison. It couldn't be the same Tommy Morrison from her childhood, could it? The universe wasn't that cruel, was it? Her question was answered an hour later when she met her assigned spotter at the armory. Corporal Jake Morrison had grown from the scrawny kid who'd tormented her into a lean, muscular man with intelligent brown eyes and hands that moved with the steady precision of an experienced soldier. He looked up from the rifle he was cleaning, and Maya saw the exact moment recognition dawned in his expression. "Holy shit," he breathed, then caught himself. "I mean, Maya? Maya Chen? From Pendleton Elementary?" "It's Staff Sergeant Chen now, Corporal," Maya replied stiffly, though inside she was dying. Of all the spotters in all the forward operating bases in Afghanistan, she had to get paired with the boy who'd made her childhood a living hell. Jake had the grace to look embarrassed. "Look, Maya, Staff Sergeant, about when we were kids, I was a complete asshole. I've regretted that stuff for years." Maya wanted to tell him it was fine, that childhood cruelties were water under the bridge, but the words stuck in her throat. Those moments of humiliation had shaped her in ways she was still trying to understand. Every perfect shot she'd made since then had been, in some small way, an attempt to prove that the scared little girl with training wheels was gone forever. "We have a job to do, Corporal," she said instead. "That's all that matters now." Jake nodded, but she could see the hurt in his eyes. Good, she thought with petty satisfaction. Let him feel uncomfortable for once. Their first mission together came 3 days later. Intelligence had identified a Taliban weapons cache hidden in a compound near the village of Sangun, and Maya's team was tasked with providing overwatch while a squad of Marines moved in to secure the site. It should have been routine, a simple reconnaissance and elimination of any threats to the ground team. Maya had spent the previous evening obsessively checking her equipment, cleaning her rifle until every component gleamed, calculating range cards for every possible shooting position around the target area. She'd studied satellite photos until she could navigate the terrain with her eyes closed, memorized the patrol patterns of enemy fighters, and rehearsed her contingency plans until they were burned into her muscle memory. None of that preparation had prepared her for the reality of watching a human being through a rifle scope and knowing that she might have to kill them. They'd been in position for 6 hours, concealed in a hide site Jake had constructed with the skill of a master craftsman. The camouflaged shelter was invisible from more than 10 feet away, offering perfect fields of fire while keeping them hidden from enemy observation. Maya's Barrett rifle was locked onto a tripod, zeroed for the exact distance to the compound's main entrance. "Movement in the courtyard," Jake whispered, his spotting scope tracking across the target area. 2 military-age males, both armed. AK-47s. Maybe an RPG launcher by the eastern wall. Maya found the targets in her scope, her crosshairs settling on the chest of the nearest fighter. He looked young, maybe 18 or 19, with a wispy beard and nervous eyes that kept scanning the surrounding hills. Probably someone's son, she thought. Maybe someone's father. "Ground team is 1 minute out," came Rodriguez's voice through their radio. "Ghost, you are cleared to engage any hostile targets." Maya's finger found the trigger, applying just enough pressure to take up the slack. The shot was there. Perfect wind conditions, clear line of sight, no chance of missing. All she had to do was squeeze. But her hand began to tremble. It was subtle at first, barely perceptible, but Jake noticed immediately. Through his spotting scope, he could see the tiny oscillations in her rifle barrel, the slight wavering of her aim that betrayed the fear coursing through her system. "Training wheels," he whispered, so quietly that she almost didn't hear it. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Training wheels. After all these years, after all her accomplishments, after everything she'd done to prove herself, she was still that scared little girl who couldn't balance a bicycle. But instead of paralysis, the insult triggered something deeper, a core of rage and determination that had been building for 18 years. Maya's breathing steadied, her hands stopped shaking, and her sight picture crystallized into perfect clarity. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and 800 meters away, the Taliban fighter's head exploded in a spray of red mist. "Tango down," Maya reported, her voice steady as granite. She worked the bolt, chambering a fresh round, and found the second target already diving for cover. The next shot caught him mid-leap, spinning him around like a top before he crashed motionless into the compound's dusty courtyard. "Holy fuck," Jake breathed, staring through his spotting scope at the 2 bodies. Both shots were perfect, dead center mass. Maya didn't respond. She was too busy processing what had just happened, the way her fear had transformed into something else entirely. Something cold and precise and absolutely lethal. The trembling in her hands was gone, replaced by a steadiness that felt almost supernatural. Over the next hour, Maya's rifle spoke 4 more times as Taliban reinforcements arrived at the compound. Each shot was perfect, each target dropped with surgical precision. By the time the ground team secured the weapons cache, 6 enemy fighters lay dead, and Maya Chen had announced her arrival in the war zone with unmistakable authority. "Not bad for someone who needs training wheels," Jake said as they began packing their equipment. There was no mockery in his voice now, only respect and perhaps a touch of awe. Maya looked at him for a long moment, then allowed herself a small smile. "The training wheels came off a long time ago, Corporal. I just needed to remember that." As they made their way back to base through the gathering dusk, Maya felt something fundamental shift inside her. The scared little girl was still there, would always be there, but she was no longer in control. In her place stood someone harder, colder, infinitely more dangerous. Someone who would never miss. The debriefing back at Camp Leatherneck was brief, but electric with tension. Major Williams reviewed the mission footage with the clinical detachment of a surgeon, but Maya could see the surprise in her commander's eyes as the perfect shots played out on the screen. 6 targets engaged, Williams summarized. 6 confirmed kills. All shots were precise and professional. No civilian casualties, no collateral damage. She looked up at Maya with an expression that might have been approval. Good work, Staff Sergeant. It looks like Quantico knew what they were doing when they sent you here. But even as Williams spoke the words of praise, Maya noticed something else in her commanding officer's expression. A flicker of uncertainty, as if she wasn't quite sure what to make of this newest addition to her sniper section. Perfect shots were one thing, but the mechanical precision with which Maya had eliminated her targets was something else entirely. Over the following weeks, Maya's reputation began to spread throughout the camp. 6 kills on her first mission became 12 after her second outing. 12 became 24 after a week-long operation in the Helmand River Valley. By the end of her first month in country, Maya Chen had logged 38 confirmed kills without a single miss. The other snipers in the section began treating her with the kind of wary respect usually reserved for natural phenomena. Staff Sergeant Marcus Tank Washington, a veteran of 3 deployments who'd been the unit's top scorer before Maya's arrival, started seeking her out for advice on long-range shooting techniques. "I've been doing this for 8 years," Tank confided one evening as they cleaned their rifles together. "Seen snipers who were good, snipers who were great, even a few who seemed superhuman. But I've never seen anything like what you do out there, Ghost." The nickname had started as a joke, Ghost for her ability to appear and disappear without a trace, but it had quickly evolved into something more respectful. Maya Chen was becoming a legend, and legends needed appropriate names. "It's just training and discipline," Maya replied, though even she was beginning to wonder if there was something more to her unprecedented accuracy. The shots came so naturally now, her rifle seeming to aim itself while her conscious mind observed from a distance. "Bullshit," Tank said with a grin. "Training and discipline don't account for what you did yesterday. 1,500 meters, moving target, 30-knot crosswind, and you threaded the needle like you were shooting in a controlled environment. That's not training, Ghost. That's gift." Maya didn't respond, but Tank's words echoed in her mind long after lights out. Was it possible that she possessed some kind of natural ability that went beyond normal human limits? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Her partnership with Jake Morrison had evolved from professional necessity into genuine respect and, slowly, something approaching friendship. The childhood antagonism between them had been burned away by the crucible of combat, replaced by the absolute trust that existed between sniper and spotter. Jake had proven himself to be an exceptional soldier, with an almost supernatural ability to read wind conditions and calculate firing solutions. More importantly, he'd shown Maya that the cruel boy from their past had grown into a man of integrity and courage. They worked together with the seamless precision of a Swiss watch, each anticipating the other's needs before they were spoken. "You know," Jake said one evening as they sat in their hide site overlooking a suspected Taliban staging area, "I need to tell you something." Maya kept her eye pressed to her scope, scanning for targets in the gathering twilight. "I'm listening." "About the training wheels thing," Jake continued. "Back when we were kids, and again on that first mission, I said it because I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared that you were better than me. Even as kids, I could see that you had something special, this focus, this determination that the rest of us didn't have. It threatened me, so I tried to tear you down. And when I saw you hesitate on that first shot, I thought maybe I'd been right all along, that you really were just pretending to be something you weren't." Maya finally looked away from her scope, meeting Jake's earnest gaze. "And now?" "Now I know I was wrong, dead wrong. You weren't weak back then. You were just human. The fact that you overcame that fear, that you turned it into strength, that makes you stronger than any of us." Before Maya could respond, her radio crackled to life. "Ghost Eyes, this is Overwatch. We've got multiple tangos moving into your sector. Count 6 military-age males, all armed, approaching from the northeast." Maya swung her rifle toward the indicated direction, her scope finding the approaching fighters with practiced ease. They were moving in a tactical formation, weapons ready, clearly experienced soldiers rather than the untrained volunteers they sometimes encountered. "Range 1,200 meters, Jake reported, his spotting scope tracking the enemy patrol. "Wind is calm, good visibility. You've got a clear shot on the lead element." Maya's crosshairs settled on the point man's chest. Through her scope, she could see his face with crystal clarity. Weathered features, intelligent eyes, the kind of patient expression that marked him as a veteran fighter. This wasn't some scared teenager caught up in events beyond his control. This was a professional, a killer who'd probably taken American lives. The distinction mattered to Maya more than she'd expected. Killing in combat was one thing, a grim necessity that came with the uniform. But there was a difference between eliminating a genuine threat and simply ending a life because orders said to do so. Her finger found the trigger's pressure point and she exhaled slowly, letting her heartbeat settle into its familiar rhythm. Between beats and that moment of perfect stillness her father had taught her to find, Maya squeezed. The rifle bucked, and 1,200 meters away, the enemy point man crumpled to the ground. Before his body had stopped moving, Maya was already working the bolt, finding her next target, settling into the cold mechanical precision that had become her trademark. 5 more shots rang out across the Afghan night, 5 more enemy fighters fell. When the silence returned, Maya had added 6 more names to her growing tally of confirmed kills. "Jesus Christ, Ghost," Jake whispered, staring through his spotting scope at the carnage below. "That was incredible. I've never seen shooting like that." Maya was already breaking down her rifle, muscle memory guiding her hands while her mind processed what had just happened. 6 shots, 6 kills, ranges from 800 to 1,300 meters, all in the space of 90 seconds. By any reasonable standard, it should have been impossible. But for Maya Chen, it was simply Tuesday night in Afghanistan. As they made their way back to base through the darkness, Maya found herself thinking about her father's old letters, the ones he'd written to her mother during his own deployment to these same mountains 20 years earlier. In those letters, he'd written about the burden of taking lives, about the weight that settled on a soldier's soul with each confirmed kill. The hardest part, he'd written, isn't pulling the trigger, it's living with the knowledge that you're good at it. Maya was beginning to understand what he'd meant. With each perfect shot, each impossible target eliminated, she felt herself changing in ways that both excited and frightened her. The scared little girl with training wheels was gone, replaced by someone infinitely more capable and infinitely more dangerous. The question was, who was she becoming? 6 weeks into her deployment, Maya Chen had become the most feared sniper in Regional Command Southwest. Her kill count had climbed to 63 confirmed targets, and the Taliban had begun offering bounties for information about the Ghost of Helmand, a phantom shooter who appeared without warning and killed without missing. The psychological impact of her presence was as devastating as the physical casualties she inflicted. Enemy fighters had begun avoiding known sniper positions entirely, disrupting their patrol patterns and supply lines. Some Taliban commanders had started moving only at night, while others refused to operate in certain sectors altogether. Major Williams called it a force multiplier. The intelligence analysts called it unprecedented psychological warfare. Maya called it Tuesday. But success in war always came with a price, and Maya was about to learn that her growing reputation had attracted attention from sources she'd never expected. The summons came on a scorching August morning, delivered by a stern-faced MP who escorted Maya to the base's secure communications center. Inside the heavily shielded trailer, she found herself face-to-face with Colonel James Harrison via secure video link. Harrison was the kind of career officer who collected medals like other people collected stamps, a man whose service record read like a synopsis of every major conflict of the past 2 decades. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Harrison began without preamble, "I've been following your performance in theater. 63 confirmed kills in 6 weeks, 0 misses, multiple long-range shots that shouldn't be possible under combat conditions. Care to explain how you're achieving these results?" Maya felt a familiar flutter of anxiety in her stomach. When senior officers started asking detailed questions about your methods, it usually meant trouble. "Sir, I follow standard sniper protocols. Proper training, equipment maintenance, and environmental assessment." "Bullshit," Harrison said bluntly. "I've reviewed your mission footage, Chen. What you're doing out there goes beyond training and equipment. Some of your shots violate the basic laws of physics as we understand them. 1,500-meter kills in 40-knot crosswinds, moving targets at extreme range, perfect accuracy under conditions that would challenge our best marksmen using computer-controlled systems." Maya's mouth went dry. She'd known her performance was exceptional, but she hadn't realized how exceptional until Harrison laid out the numbers. Put in those terms, her achievements did sound impossible. "Sir, I don't know what to tell you. I see the target, I calculate the shot, I squeeze the trigger. The rounds hit where I aim them. Harrison leaned forward, his weathered face filling the screen. Let me tell you what I think is happening, Staff Sergeant. I think you're using some kind of performance enhancement, either technological assistance or pharmaceutical intervention. Because what you're claiming to achieve naturally is simply not within the range of human capability. The accusation hit Maya like a physical blow. In the military, being suspected of using performance-enhancing drugs was tantamount to career suicide. Even if the charges were ultimately dismissed, the stain would follow her for the rest of her service. Sir, I've never used any unauthorized substances or equipment. I submit to random drug testing like every other Marine, and my equipment is standard issue. Then how do you explain results that are statistically impossible? Maya struggled to find an answer that wouldn't make her sound delusional. How could she explain the zone she entered when shooting? That state of perfect calm where time seemed to slow and the rifle felt like an extension of her own body. How could she describe the way the shots came to her complete and perfect, as if her subconscious mind was calculating ballistic solutions faster than any computer? I don't know, sir. I just shoot and I hit what I'm aiming at. Harrison studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Here's what's going to happen, Chen. You're being reassigned to a special task force operating out of Forward Operating Base Chapman. Your new commanding officer will be Lieutenant Colonel Sandra Reeves, and you'll be working with a hand-picked team on high-value target elimination. Maya felt her world shift beneath her feet. FOB Chapman was deep in Taliban territory, a fortress carved out of hostile mountains where only the most elite units operated. It was both a promotion and a potential death sentence. What about my current assignment, sir? Major Williams is expecting me for... Major Williams has been informed. Your new orders are being transmitted now. Harrison's expression softened slightly. Listen, Chen. I don't know how you're doing what you're doing, but results don't lie. We need someone with your capabilities for operations that can't tolerate failure. Think of this as an opportunity to serve at the highest levels. The connection terminated, leaving Maya alone with her churning thoughts. Within hours, she was on a helicopter bound for FOB Chapman, her gear packed, and her partnership with Jake Morrison severed without warning. Jake had taken the news with characteristic stoicism, but Maya could see the hurt in his eyes. They'd become genuine friends over their weeks together, forged in the crucible of combat into a partnership that transcended their childhood animosity. Take care of yourself out there, Ghost, he'd said as she boarded the helicopter. And remember, the training wheels came off a long time ago. FOB Chapman perched on a ridgeline like a medieval fortress, its concrete barriers and razor wire offering protection against the hostile wilderness that surrounded it. The base housed fewer than 200 personnel, all of them special operations soldiers, with clearances that Maya didn't even know existed. Her new commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Sandra Reeves, was a woman who radiated competence and danger in equal measure. Reeves was in her early 40s, with steel-gray hair and the kind of pale eyes that seemed to see through bullshit with surgical precision. Staff Sergeant Chen, Reeves said as Maya reported for duty, welcome to Task Force Phantom. We're a joint special operations unit tasked with eliminating high-value targets throughout Regional Command East. Our operations are classified above your current clearance level, which means you'll be signing approximately 47 additional non-disclosure agreements before we're finished. Quote, Maya nodded, though inside she was reeling. Joint Special Operations meant she'd be working with personnel from every branch of the military, plus civilian contractors whose backgrounds were shrouded in deliberate mystery. Your reputation precedes you, Reeves continued. 63 confirmed kills without a miss is the kind of performance that gets attention at the highest levels of government. Some people think you're too good to be true. Others think you're exactly what we need for a mission that's been stalled for 6 months. What kind of mission, ma'am? Reeves activated a wall-mounted display that showed satellite imagery of a mountain compound deep in the Afghan wilderness. The facility was massive, with multiple buildings, defensive positions, and what looked like underground bunkers carved into the rock itself. This is the stronghold of Malik Hassan, one of the most dangerous Taliban commanders in the region. Hassan has been responsible for dozens of attacks on coalition forces, including the IED strike that killed your father in 2003. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She'd known her father had died in Afghanistan, but she'd never learned the specific circumstances or the identity of those responsible. Hearing Hassan's name was like being punched in the stomach. Hassan's compound is protected by natural barriers, electronic surveillance, and approximately 200 heavily armed fighters, Reeves continued. Conventional assault would require a full battalion and would result in massive casualties. Airstrikes are ineffective due to the underground bunkers. Which leaves us with one option: surgical elimination of key targets to disrupt their command structure. Maya studied the satellite images, her tactical mind automatically cataloging fields of fire, approach routes, and potential hide sites. The compound was a sniper's nightmare: long sight lines, multiple defensive positions, and limited concealment for infiltrating teams. What's the longest confirmed shot you've ever made, Chen? 1,800 meters, ma'am. Moving target in moderate crosswind. Reeves nodded approvingly. The shots we need for this mission will be at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, under combat conditions, against targets who know they're being hunted. Think you can handle that? Maya felt her pulse quicken. 2,000 meters was beyond the effective range of most sniper rifles, pushing into territory where atmospheric conditions and equipment limitations became critical factors. It was the kind of shot that existed more in theory than in practice. I'll need to see the equipment and study the terrain, but yes, ma'am, I can make those shots. Good. You'll be working with Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez as your spotter. Rodriguez is Navy SEAL with 15 years of special operations experience. He's forgotten more about long-range shooting than most snipers ever learn. Maya recognized the name immediately. Rodriguez was legendary throughout the special operations community, with a reputation for impossible missions and supernatural survival instincts. The fact that she was being paired with someone of his caliber spoke to the importance of the mission. Her new partner turned out to be a compact, weathered man in his late 30s, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from surviving 100 impossible situations. Rodriguez looked her up and down with professional assessment, taking in her equipment, her bearing, and the subtle indicators that marked her as either a rising star or a dangerous amateur. "So you're Ghost," he said without preamble. "Heard a lot about you. Some good, some concerning." Concerning? Nobody shoots that well without some kind of edge. The question is whether your edge comes from skill, luck, or something else entirely. We're about to find out. Rodriguez led her to the base's firing range, where a specialized rifle unlike anything Maya had ever seen was waiting for her. The weapon was a heavily modified Barrett M107A1, fitted with an advanced optic system and a barrel that had been manufactured to tolerances measured in thousandths of inches. "This is the XM 2010 Enhanced Sniper Rifle," Rodriguez explained. "Effective range out to 2,500 meters with the right ammunition. The optic system includes ballistic computer, rangefinder, and environmental sensors. Everything you need to make impossible shots possible." Maya lifted the rifle, feeling its weight and balance. The weapon was heavier than her usual Barrett, but it possessed a solidity and precision that spoke of engineering excellence. Through the scope, the world transformed into a realm of perfect clarity, where distant targets seemed close enough to touch. "Let's see what you can do," Rodriguez said, pointing to a series of targets set at increasing distances. "Start at 1,000 meters and work your way out." Maya settled into a prone shooting position, her body automatically adjusting to accommodate the new rifle's characteristics. Through the advanced optic system, the 1,000-meter target appeared with startling clarity, every detail visible despite the distance. The shot felt perfect as it left the barrel, the rifle's recoil absorbed by her body's alignment. Downrange, the target's center circle exploded in a spray of white fragments. "Good," Rodriguez said, studying the impact through his spotting scope. "Now try 1,500. Maya adjusted her point of aim and fired again. Another perfect hit, this one striking the target's exact center despite the increased range and the slight crosswind that had begun to pick up. By the time she'd engaged targets out to 2,000 meters, Rodriguez was staring at her with something approaching disbelief. Every shot had been perfect, each one finding the center of targets that should have been nearly impossible to hit under field conditions. "Holy shit," he breathed. "The stories about you are true. You really don't miss." Maya set the rifle down, her hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline rush. The weapon had felt like a natural extension of her body, responding to her will with mechanical precision. For the first time since arriving at FOB Chapman, she felt confident about the mission ahead. "When do we go after Hassan?" she asked. Rodriguez checked his watch. "Mission briefing is at 0600 tomorrow. We deploy the following night. Hope you're ready, Ghost, because this one's going to test everything you think you know about shooting." That night, Maya lay awake in her narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the day's revelations. She was about to attempt shots that pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible, using equipment she'd never trained with, against targets who had killed her father. The scared little girl inside her whispered about training wheels and impossible expectations, but that voice was growing quieter with each passing day, drowned out by something colder and more confident, a predator that had finally found its perfect hunting ground. Tomorrow she would discover just how far her abilities could be pushed. Tomorrow she would learn whether Maya Chen was truly the ghost of Helmand, or just another soldier in over her head. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Maya's dreams were filled with crosshairs and distant targets, with the sound of rifles firing and the whisper of bullets cutting through mountain air. In her dreams, she never missed. She never even came close. The mission briefing began at 0600 sharp, in a secure conference room buried deep within FOB Chapman's underground command center. Maya found herself surrounded by some of the most elite soldiers in the American military, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Air Force pararescue specialists, and a handful of personnel whose unit patches she didn't recognize. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves stood at the front of the room, her laser pointer dancing across a three-dimensional holographic display of Hassan's mountain compound. The technology was unlike anything Maya had seen before, a perfect recreation of the target area that allowed the briefing team to zoom into individual buildings and examine defensive positions from every angle. "Operation Patriarch has been in development for 8 months, Reeves began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Intelligence indicates that Malik Hassan is planning a coordinated attack on 3 coalition bases simultaneously, using weapons-grade explosives smuggled in from Pakistan. If successful, this attack could kill over 200 American and Allied personnel." Maya felt her stomach tighten as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about revenge for her father's death. It was about preventing a catastrophic loss of life that would dwarf anything the Taliban had achieved to date. "Hassan's compound is built into a natural fortress," Reeves continued, highlighting various features with her laser pointer. "Steep approaches on 3 sides, overlapping fields of fire, and early warning systems that can detect movement from 5 kilometers away. The main buildings are constructed with reinforced concrete and steel designed to withstand direct hits from artillery and airstrikes." The holographic display zoomed in on the compound's central courtyard, where Maya could see figures moving between buildings. Even in the satellite imagery, the defensive positions were obvious. Sandbagged machine gun nests, mortar pits, and what looked like anti-aircraft emplacements. Previous attempts to eliminate Hassan have failed due to the compound's natural advantages and the presence of civilian hostages. Hassan deliberately surrounds himself with non-combatants, making conventional assault or airstrikes politically untenable. Chief Rodriguez leaned forward in his chair. "What's the current intelligence on Hassan's routine? When is he most vulnerable?" "Hassan conducts daily inspections of his perimeter defenses at 0530 hours local time," replied Captain Sarah Martinez, the operations intelligence officer. "He follows the same route every morning, accompanied by 2 bodyguards and his second-in-command, a bomb maker named Farid Ansari who's responsible for the IED networks throughout the region." Maya studied the compound's layout, her tactical mind automatically calculating angles and distances. The morning inspection route took Hassan along the compound's eastern wall, which faced a ridge approximately 2,200 meters away. It was the only position that offered a clear line of sight to the target area, but it was also dangerously exposed to counter-sniper fire. "The shot will be attempted from grid reference 42 SUB 12,345-67,890, Reeves announced, highlighting a rocky outcropping on the holographic display. "Range to target is 2,150 meters, with an elevation differential of 430 meters. Weather conditions at 0530 hours typically include variable winds of 8 to 15 knots from multiple directions." Maya felt her pulse quicken as she absorbed the parameters. 2,100 meters was at the very edge of her rifle's effective range, made even more challenging by the mountain environment's unpredictable wind patterns. It would be the most difficult shot of her career, possibly the most difficult shot anyone had ever attempted under combat conditions. The primary target is Hassan himself, Reeves continued. Secondary targets include Ansari and Hassan's personal bodyguards. The elimination of these individuals will disrupt the planned attacks and significantly degrade Taliban capabilities in the region. What about extraction? Asked Master Sergeant Johnson, one of the Army Rangers who would be providing security for the sniper team. Once the shots are fired, you'll have approximately 3 minutes before enemy forces begin converging on your position. A helicopter extraction is planned from Landing Zone Alpha, but the terrain requires a 2-kilometer movement under fire to reach the pickup point. Maya exchanged glances with Rodriguez, both of them understanding the unspoken reality. If the shots missed or failed to achieve the desired effect, the extraction would become a running firefight through some of the most hostile terrain in Afghanistan. Any questions? Reeves asked, scanning the assembled team members. Maya raised her hand. Ma'am, what's the wind data for the target area? I'll need detailed atmospheric readings to calculate the ballistic solution. Captain Martinez consulted her tablet. Historical weather data shows wind patterns vary significantly based on elevation and time of day. At 0530 hours, typical conditions include thermal updrafts from the valley floor, crosswinds from the mountain passes, and occasional downdrafts from the peaks above. We'll have real-time weather monitoring from an unmanned aerial vehicle, but conditions can change rapidly in that environment. Maya nodded, already beginning to formulate her approach. 2,100 meters in mountain conditions meant she'd need to account for air density, temperature variations, humidity, and complex wind patterns that could change between the time she fired and when the bullet reached its target. Equipment check is at 1,400 hours, Reeves announced. Mission departure is at 2,000 hours. Get some rest, people. Tomorrow morning, we end Malik Hassan's war. As the briefing concluded and personnel began filing out of the conference room, Rodriguez approached Maya with an expression of concern mixed with professional curiosity. You look like you're thinking hard about something, he observed. Having second thoughts about the shot? Maya shook her head. Not second thoughts. Just trying to visualize the ballistic solution. 2,100 meters in mountain conditions. That's going to require some creative mathematics. The rifle's ballistic computer will handle most of the calculations, Rodriguez pointed out. Environmental sensors, range finding, wind compensation, it's all automated. Technology is only as good as the person using it, Maya replied. I've made long shots before, but never at this range under these conditions. If I miss... You won't miss, Rodriguez said with quiet confidence. I've seen your service record, Ghost. 73 confirmed kills without a single miss. Whatever edge you have, whatever makes you different from other snipers, this is exactly the kind of situation where it matters most. Maya appreciated his confidence, but she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow's mission would test her abilities in ways she'd never experienced. Every shot she'd made to date had been within the normal parameters of sniper operations, challenging but achievable through skill and training. What they were asking her to do tomorrow was different. It was the kind of shot that existed in theory more than practice, the kind of extreme-range elimination that required perfect conditions and flawless execution. The afternoon equipment check revealed just how much trust the military was placing in her abilities. The XM 2010 rifle had been further modified with experimental components, a custom barrel manufactured to laboratory specifications, advanced ammunition with ballistic characteristics unlike anything in the standard inventory, and an optics system that cost more than some soldiers made in a year. This is a one-off prototype, explained Master Sergeant Chen, the unit's senior armorer. The barrel was manufactured using computer-controlled machinery, with tolerances measured in 0.010 of an inch. The ammunition is match-grade with temperature-stable propellant and ballistic tips, designed for optimal performance at extreme range. Maya examined the rifle with reverent care, noting every modification and enhancement. The weapon was a masterpiece of engineering, but it was also completely unfamiliar. She'd have exactly one opportunity to learn its characteristics before attempting the most important shot of her career. I'll need time to zero the rifle and test the ammunition, she told Rodriguez. Even with perfect equipment, I need to understand how this particular weapon behaves. We've got 3 hours before mission departure, Rodriguez replied. The range is all yours. Maya spent those 3 hours in intensive preparation, firing round after round at increasing distances while Rodriguez recorded every detail of the rifle's performance. The weapon shot with mechanical precision, but Maya noticed subtle differences from her usual Barrett. Slightly different recoil characteristics, a trigger that required fractionally more pressure, and a scope that tracked targets with almost supernatural smoothness. By the time they'd finished, Maya had fired nearly 100 rounds and felt confident in her understanding of the rifle's behavior. At 2,000 meters, she was consistently hitting targets within a 6-inch circle, accuracy that should have been impossible under field conditions. "That's the best shooting I've ever seen," Rodriguez admitted as they packed their equipment. "If you can replicate that performance tomorrow morning, Hassan is a dead man." "If he's doing a lot of work in that sentence," Maya replied, though she felt more confident than her words suggested. The rifle felt right in her hands, responding to her will with the kind of precision that made difficult shots seem routine. The infiltration began at 2,000 hours, with the team loading into modified Black Hawk helicopters for the flight to their insertion point. Maya found herself pressed between Rodriguez and Master Sergeant Johnson, her rifle case secured against her chest-like armor. The flight into Taliban territory was conducted in complete darkness, the helicopters flying nap-of-the-earth profiles that followed mountain valleys and ridgelines with stomach-churning precision. Through her night vision goggles, Maya watched the terrain scroll past below, an alien landscape of sharp peaks and deep chasms that looked more like the surface of another planet than anything on Earth. 5 minutes to insertion, the crew chief announced over the intercom. "Weather report shows light winds at the target area. Visibility unlimited, temperature 38 degrees Fahrenheit." Maya felt her heartbeat accelerate as the helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone. In less than 10 hours, she would attempt a shot that would either cement her reputation as the most skilled sniper in military history or end her career in catastrophic failure. The insertion itself was textbook perfect. Fast ropes deployed in darkness, personnel on the ground in under 30 seconds, helicopters gone before enemy forces could react. Maya found herself crouched in rocky terrain with 7 other elite soldiers, her rifle case feeling impossibly heavy in the thin mountain air. "Movement in 2 minutes," Johnson whispered into his radio. "Ghost and eyes to primary position. Security elements to overwatch positions. Radio silence until target acquisition." Quote, Maya and Rodriguez began their careful movement toward the sniper position, navigating through boulder fields and across razor-sharp ridgelines while carrying nearly 100 pounds of equipment each. The route had been planned to avoid known Taliban patrol areas, but in hostile territory, every step carried the risk of discovery and death. It took them 4 hours to cover the 3 kilometers to their hide site, moving with the patient care of predators who understood that haste led to graves. By the time they reached the designated position, Maya was exhausted but alert, her body running on adrenaline and professional focus. The hide site itself was a natural depression in the rocks, offering perfect concealment while providing clear fields of fire toward Hassan's compound. Rodriguez began setting up his spotting scope while Maya assembled her rifle, each component clicking into place with satisfying precision. "Range to target 2,160 meters, Rodriguez reported quietly, his voice barely audible even at close range. "Wind appears calm, but I'm seeing some thermal activity in the valley. Could get interesting when the sun comes up." Maya settled into her shooting position, adjusting her body alignment until the rifle felt like a natural extension of her skeleton. Through the advanced optic system, Hassan's compound appeared with startling clarity despite the distance and darkness. 2 hours until sunrise, Rodriguez whispered. 2.5 hours until Hassan's morning inspection. You should get some rest while you can. Maya nodded, though rest was the last thing on her mind. In less than 3 hours, she would attempt a shot that would either save hundreds of American lives or condemn them to death. The weight of that responsibility was almost crushing, but it was also strangely liberating. For the first time since her deployment began, Maya felt like she was exactly where she belonged, behind a rifle, in a hostile environment, preparing to eliminate threats to her fellow soldiers. This was what she'd been trained for, what she'd been born for. As the night slowly gave way to dawn, Maya Chen prepared to discover whether she was truly the ghost of Helmand or just another soldier with delusions of grandeur. The answer would come with the sunrise, measured in the flight time of a single bullet across 2,100 meters of hostile mountain air. We're deep into this incredible story now, and I hope you're as captivated as I am by these unfolding events. The amount of effort that goes into researching, writing, and narrating these novel-length stories is immense. We're talking about creating content equivalent to a published book. But it's worth it to bring you stories that truly engage and transport you to another world. If you're enjoying this journey so far, please take a second to like this video and share it with friends who appreciate great storytelling. Your support means everything and helps us continue creating these detailed, epic narratives. We still have so much more to discover together, so let's see how this situation unfolds. Dawn came to the Afghan mountains like a slow-burning fuse, painting the eastern peaks in shades of gold and crimson while leaving the valleys wrapped in purple shadow. Maya had been in position for 6 hours, her body locked into perfect shooting alignment while her mind ran through endless calculations of wind speed, air density, and ballistic trajectories. Through her rifle scope, Hassan's compound was beginning to stir with morning activity. She could see guards changing positions, smoke rising from cooking fires, and the slow movement of personnel preparing for another day of war. Somewhere in that maze of concrete and steel, Malik Hassan was preparing for his daily inspection routine, the same routine that had kept him alive for 5 years and would end his life in the next 30 minutes. "Movement in the courtyard," Rodriguez whispered, his voice barely audible even though they were lying side by side. "Multiple personnel. Looks like they're setting up for the morning briefing." Maya tracked her scope across the compound's central area, watching armed figures take positions around what appeared to be a map table. The range was extreme, over 2,000 meters, but the advanced optics system brought everything into sharp focus. She could see individual faces, read body language, even identify weapons and equipment. "Target acquisition in the guard tower," Rodriguez continued. "2 personnel with what looks like a sniper rifle. They're scanning the ridge lines." Maya felt her pulse quicken. Counter-sniper teams were a constant threat in these mountains, and Hassan's security detail was too professional to ignore the possibility of long-range assassination attempts. If they identified her position before she could take the shot, the mission would become a desperate firefight with very low odds of survival. "Time check?" she asked quietly. 05:02, 5 hours. Hassan should begin his inspection in 5 minutes if he maintains his usual schedule. Maya made final adjustments to her rifle settings, inputting wind and temperature data from Rodriguez's environmental sensors. The ballistic computer calculated dozens of variables in milliseconds, providing a firing solution that should account for every factor affecting the bullet's 2,100-meter journey. Should account for. The words carried more weight than Maya liked to acknowledge. At this range, a wind shift of just 2 miles per hour could mean the difference between a perfect shot and a catastrophic miss. Temperature variations could affect propellant performance. Even the rotation of the Earth became a factor in the bullet's trajectory. "Contact," Rodriguez breathed. "Target 1 emerging from the main building. Positive identification on Malik Hassan." Maya's scope found the man who had haunted her dreams for 2 decades. Hassan was smaller than she'd expected, perhaps 50 years old, with a graying beard and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. He moved with the careful precision of a professional soldier, his eyes constantly scanning for threats, even within his own stronghold. Behind Hassan walked 3 other men, his bodyguards and, Maya hoped, Fareed Ansari, the bomb-maker responsible for countless American casualties. At this range, positive identification was difficult, but the intelligence photos had prepared her for this moment. "Target 2 confirmed," Rodriguez whispered. Ansari is the tall one with the limp, walking on Hassan's left side. Both primary targets are in the open. Maya's breathing slowed as she entered the zone, that state of perfect calm where the rest of the world faded away and only the shot mattered. Her heartbeat became a metronome, steady and predictable, marking the rhythm of life and death. Through her scope, she watched Hassan begin his inspection route, moving along the compound's eastern wall exactly as intelligence had predicted. The morning sun was at her back, providing perfect illumination while keeping her position shadowed from enemy observation. Range, 2,160 meters. Wind, variable, 5 to 8 knots from the southwest. Temperature, 39 degrees Fahrenheit and rising. Air pressure, adjusted for elevation. All variables entered into the ballistic computer, all calculations complete. Maya's crosshairs settled on Hassan's chest, tracking his movement with mechanical precision. The shot was there. Perfect conditions, clear line of sight, target in the open. All she had to do was squeeze the trigger. But something was wrong. It was a feeling more than a conscious observation, a subtle wrongness that Maya couldn't immediately identify. Hassan's inspection was proceeding exactly as predicted, his bodyguards maintaining their usual positions, everything unfolding according to the intelligence briefing. Except for the children. Maya's scope had picked up movement in one of the compound's secondary buildings. Small figures moving near windows, faces pressed against glass, watching Hassan's inspection with the curiosity of youth. Intelligence had mentioned civilian presence in the compound, but seeing actual children changed the psychological equation entirely. Problem, Maya whispered. Civilian presence in Building 3, multiple children at the windows. Rodriguez adjusted his spotting scope to confirm Maya's observation. I see them. At least 6 children, maybe more. Ages appear to be between 8 and 14. Maya felt her confidence waver. At 2,160 meters, even a perfect shot carried risks. Bullets could fragment on impact, ricochet off hard surfaces, or be deflected by unexpected obstacles. The presence of children in the target area added variables that no ballistic computer could calculate. Shot is still viable, Rodriguez assessed. Target is clear of civilian structures. Impact area is contained. Maya knew he was right from a tactical standpoint. Hassan was in the open, away from the buildings containing civilians, and her angle of fire would send any fragments into empty ground. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were different things entirely. Through her scope, she watched one of the children, a girl perhaps 10 years old, wave at Hassan as he passed below her window. Hassan smiled and waved back, a gesture so human and normal that it seemed completely at odds with his reputation as a terrorist leader. 30 seconds to optimal shot window, Rodriguez warned. Target will be moving behind cover in 1 minute. Maya's finger found the trigger, applying just enough pressure to take up the mechanical slack. The shot was perfect. Wind conditions stable, target in optimal position, ballistic solution calculated and verified. Everything she'd trained for, everything she'd worked toward, had led to this moment. But the scared little girl inside her, never fully silenced despite years of military service, whispered a single word: training wheels. What if she missed? What if some unforeseen variable sent her bullet astray? What if Hassan's children became collateral damage because Maya Chen had finally encountered a shot beyond her abilities? 10 seconds, Rodriguez whispered urgently. Take the shot. Maya's breathing stopped. Her heart rate slowed. The crosshairs settled on Hassan's center mass with surgical precision. Every instinct, every hour of training, every successful shot she'd ever made told her to squeeze the trigger. Instead, she hesitated. It was only for a split second, barely perceptible, even to Rodriguez, but in that moment of doubt, Hassan moved. He stepped behind one of his bodyguards to point at something on the compound's wall, presenting an obscured target instead of the clear shot Maya had been preparing for. Shit, Rodriguez breathed. Target is partially concealed. Shot window is closing. Maya tracked Hassan through her scope, waiting for him to move back into the clear, but his inspection routine had shifted. Instead of following his usual path along the wall, he was now examining defensive positions that kept him surrounded by personnel and obstacles. Abort, Maya whispered, though the word felt like acid in her throat. Target is no longer viable. Rodriguez looked at her with surprise, and something that might have been disappointment. Negative. Target is still accessible. Partial concealment, but the shot is makeable. Maya understood his confusion. She'd made more difficult shots under worse conditions. A partially concealed target at 2,160 meters was challenging, but well within her demonstrated capabilities. Any other sniper would take the shot without hesitation. But Maya couldn't shake the image of that little girl waving from the window, couldn't ignore the possibility that hesitation and doubt had finally caught up with her. For 73 confirmed kills, she'd been perfect. For 73 targets, she'd been the ghost of Helmand who never missed. Maybe it was time to discover if she was human after all. Mission abort, she said firmly. Target window has closed. Quote. Rodriguez stared at her for a long moment, then keyed his radio. Overwatch, this is Eyes. Mission abort. Target window closed. No shot taken. The response was immediate and sharp. Eyes, Overwatch. Confirm mission status. Target is still in the open. Overwatch. Target is partially concealed with civilian proximity concerns. Sniper assessment is no shot. A longer pause, then Lieutenant Colonel Reeves' voice cut through the static. Ghost, this is Patriarch 6. Confirm your assessment. Target elimination is critical to preventing imminent attacks on coalition bases. Maya felt the weight of command pressure settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. She knew the importance of the mission, understood the lives that hung in the balance, but she also knew the difference between a perfect shot and a desperate gamble. Patriarch 6, this is Ghost. Target is partially concealed with unacceptable collateral damage risks. Shot is not viable at this time. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for hours. Maya could imagine the conversations taking place in the Tactical Operations Center, the decisions being weighed by officers whose careers depended on mission success. Finally, Reeves' voice returned. Ghost, eyes, you are ordered to maintain position and await further target windows. Hassan will complete his inspection and return to covered positions. This may be our only opportunity. Maya understood the subtext. Take the shot, regardless of conditions. Eliminate Hassan even if it meant accepting risks that violated her professional standards. Choose mission success over personal principles. Through her scope, she watched Hassan continue his inspection, gradually moving toward covered positions that would make any shot impossible. In 5 minutes, maybe less, he would disappear into the compound's underground bunkers, and the mission would be a failure. Ghost, Rodriguez whispered. I know what you're thinking. But consider the bigger picture. Hassan's planning attacks that could kill hundreds of Americans. Sometimes we have to take calculated risks. Maya knew he was right. In the coldly logical calculus of warfare, sacrificing perfection to prevent greater casualties made tactical sense. But something deeper than logic was holding her back, a fundamental understanding that once she started accepting good enough shots, she would stop being the sniper who never missed. She would become just another soldier with a rifle, taking chances and hoping for the best. 30 seconds to hard cover, Rodriguez reported. This is the last viable shot window. Maya's crosshairs found Hassan one final time, tracking his movement as he approached the compound's main entrance. The angle was difficult, the target partially obscured, but the shot was theoretically possible. Any sniper in the world would take it without hesitation. Any sniper except Maya Chen. Mission abort, she said again, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. No shot taken. Rodriguez lowered his spotting scope and looked at her with an expression mixing professional respect with complete bafflement. Ghost, I have to ask why. You've made harder shots under worse conditions. What's different about this one? Maya began breaking down her rifle, her hands moving with automatic precision while her mind struggled to articulate what had happened. How could she explain that perfection was both her greatest strength and her most crushing weakness? How could she describe the terror of discovering that she might be human after all? I don't know, she admitted. I just couldn't take the shot. As they began their movement back to the extraction point, Maya felt something fundamental shift inside her. For the first time since her deployment began, she had encountered a situation where being the ghost of Helmand hadn't been enough. She had found the edge of her abilities, and it had been closer than she'd ever imagined. The question now was whether that edge marked the beginning of her growth as a soldier, or the end of her career as a sniper. Behind them, Hassan's compound continued its daily routine, unaware of how close death had come and gone in the span of a single heartbeat. The war would continue, other missions would follow, and Maya Chen would have to decide who she wanted to be when the shooting started again. The little girl with training wheels was still there, buried deep but never fully silenced. Maya was beginning to understand that maybe that wasn't a weakness after all. Maybe it was the only thing keeping her human. The debriefing was a professional execution disguised as a tactical review. Maya sat at a metal table in FOB Chapman's secure conference room, facing a panel of officers whose expressions ranged from disappointment to barely controlled fury. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves occupied the center chair, her steel-gray eyes boring into Maya with the intensity of a cutting torch. Staff Sergeant Chen, Reeves began, her voice carrying the chill of a winter morning, you had Malik Hassan in your crosshairs at optimal range with clear weather conditions and perfect ballistic solutions. You chose not to take the shot. Explain your decision. Maya had spent the 12 hours since the mission abort rehearsing this moment, trying to find words that would convey her reasoning without sounding like excuses. Nothing she'd prepared seemed adequate under the weight of official scrutiny. "Ma'am, the target was partially concealed with unacceptable collateral damage risks. The shot did not meet the standards for positive engagement." "Bullshit," Colonel Harrison's voice cut through the secure video connection from Bagram Air Base. "I've reviewed the mission footage, Chen. The target was clearly visible. The civilian structures were outside the blast zone, and you had the best ballistic conditions we've seen in 6 months. You had the shot, and you choked." The accusation hit Maya like a physical blow. In the military, being accused of cowardice was worse than being accused of incompetence. It was a stain that followed soldiers for the rest of their careers. A whispered suspicion that destroyed reputations and ended promising careers. "Sir, I assessed the tactical situation and determined that the shot carried unacceptable risks. That assessment was based on professional judgment, not fear." Professional judgment? Major Williams had been patched into the conference from Camp Leatherneck, her disappointment evident even through the video link. "Your professional judgment has resulted in a blown mission and intelligence indicating that Hassan has accelerated his attack timeline. 3 coalition bases are now at immediate risk because you couldn't pull the trigger when it mattered." Maya felt the walls of the conference room closing in around her. She'd known there would be consequences for the mission abort, but she hadn't anticipated the full weight of institutional displeasure settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. "Ma'am, I've completed 73 confirmed kills without a miss. My record speaks to my willingness to engage targets when the conditions are appropriate." "Your record," Reeves said coldly, "is exactly what makes this failure so incomprehensible. The Maya Chen who arrived in Afghanistan 3 months ago would have taken that shot without hesitation. The question is, what's changed?" Maya struggled to find an answer that wouldn't destroy what remained of her career. How could she explain that perfectionism had become a cage, that the pressure of never missing had made her afraid to take any shot that wasn't absolutely guaranteed? How could she admit that the scared little girl with training wheels was still there, whispering doubts at the worst possible moments? "I don't know, ma'am. I thought the shot was too risky, given the proximity of civilian structures." "Civilian structures that were over 300 meters from the target area," Colonel Harrison interjected. "Civilians who will become casualties themselves when Hassan's bombs start exploding in crowded markets and schools. Your perfectionism has become operational paralysis, Chen." The words struck home with devastating accuracy. Maya had spent so many years building her reputation as the sniper who never missed, that she'd forgotten the purpose behind the precision. War wasn't about perfect shots. It was about stopping threats and protecting lives, even when the conditions weren't ideal. "Here's what's going to happen," Reeves announced. "Staff Sergeant Chen, you're being reassigned to rear echelon duties pending a full psychological evaluation. Your sniper qualifications are suspended until further notice." Maya felt her world collapse around her. Being stripped of sniper status was tantamount to being told she no longer had value as a soldier. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd built her identity around, was being taken away because of one moment of hesitation. "Ma'am, I request the opportunity to continue operational duties. 1 mission abort doesn't negate 3 months of successful operations." "1 mission abort that may have cost hundreds of American lives," Harrison replied sharply. "We can't afford snipers who second-guess themselves when lives are on the line. You're done, Chen. Pack your gear and report to the base psychologist." The connection terminated, leaving Maya alone with Reeves in the suddenly quiet conference room. The colonel studied her for a long moment, her expression softening slightly from professional anger to something approaching sympathy. "Off the record," Reeves said quietly, "I think you're a good soldier who got lost inside her own head. The pressure of being perfect is something I understand better than you might think, but understanding doesn't change the tactical reality. We needed Hassan dead, and he's still breathing." Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The weight of failure was crushing, made worse by the knowledge that Reeves was probably right. She had gotten lost inside her own head, paralyzed by the fear of being imperfect. "The psychological evaluation isn't meant as punishment," Reeves continued. "It's meant to help you figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. Use the time wisely, Chen. Careers have been rebuilt from worse setbacks than this." An hour later, Maya found herself in the sterile office of Captain David Park, the base's senior psychologist. Park was a soft-spoken man in his early 40s. with the kind of patient demeanor that probably worked well with traumatized soldiers but felt completely wrong for Maya's current situation. "Tell me about the mission," Park said, settling back in his chair with a notepad and the air of someone who had all the time in the world. Maya provided a clinical recounting of the events, focusing on tactical details and trying to avoid the emotional minefield of her actual decision-making process. Park listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, but mostly just observing her with professional attention. "Now tell me about what you were feeling when you had Hassan in your crosshairs," Park said when she finished. "I was assessing the tactical situation and determining the optimal engagement parameters." "That's what you were doing. I asked what you were feeling." Maya shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Military debriefings focused on actions and outcomes, not feelings and emotions. The psychological approach felt foreign and dangerous, like being asked to strip away the professional armor that had protected her for years. "I felt uncertain. About the civilian proximity, about the shot angle, about the risks involved." "Uncertain," Park repeated, making a note. "When was the last time you felt uncertain about a shot?" The question struck at something deeper than Maya had expected. When was the last time she'd felt uncertain? Not since her first mission. Not since that moment when Jake Morrison's childhood taunt had transformed her fear into deadly precision. "I don't remember," she admitted. 73 confirmed kills, 0 misses. That's an unprecedented record, Staff Sergeant. It's also an impossible standard to maintain indefinitely. Maya felt a flash of anger. "I'm not asking for it to be easy. I'm just trying to do my job." "Are you?" Park leaned forward slightly. "Or are you trying to maintain a reputation that's become more important than the mission itself?" The accusation stung because it contained too much truth to dismiss. Maya had become addicted to being perfect, to being the ghost of Helmand who never missed. The thought of failing, of proving that she was human after all, had become more terrifying than the thought of death. "What happens if I miss?" she asked quietly. "You take another shot," Park replied. "That's what snipers do. They engage targets, assess results, and continue the mission. Missing doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human. Being human gets people killed. Being paralyzed by perfectionism gets even more people killed. You had a clear shot at a high-value target, and you chose not to take it because you were afraid of being imperfect. How many coalition soldiers will die because Hassan is still alive?" Maya didn't have an answer. The question had been haunting her since the mission abort, a weight that grew heavier with each passing hour. How many American lives would be lost because Maya Chen had been afraid to miss? The session continued for another hour, with Park probing gently but persistently at the psychological foundations of Maya's perfectionism. By the time she left his office, Maya felt emotionally exhausted and more confused than ever about her future as a soldier. Her gear had been moved to a rear area barracks, away from the operational units and the constant reminders of her failure. Maya's rifle case sat unopened in the corner of her small room, its presence both comforting and accusatory. The XM 2010 that had felt like magic in her hands now seemed like evidence of her inadequacy. That evening, as Maya sat alone in the mess hall picking at a meal she didn't want, Rodriguez approached her table. The Navy SEAL looked tired and frustrated, his usual confidence replaced by something that might have been disappointment. "Heard about your reassignment," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "Word is you're getting shipped stateside for psych evaluation." Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak without revealing the full extent of her emotional turmoil. "You know what I don't understand?" Rodriguez continued. "I've worked with a lot of snipers over the years. Good ones, great ones, even a few who seemed superhuman. But I've never seen anyone shoot like you did on the range. Perfect shots at impossible distances, conditions that should have made accuracy impossible. And then you get Hassan in your crosshairs, and you freeze up like a rookie." "I didn't freeze up," Maya protested, though the words sounded hollow even to her. "Then what would you call it? Because from where I was sitting, it looked like you found the edge of your comfort zone and decided not to cross it." Rodriguez leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Let me tell you something about comfort zones, Ghost. They're the enemy of operational success. Every mission pushes you beyond what feels safe, beyond what feels certain. The moment you start choosing safety over mission accomplishment, you stop being a special operator and start being a liability." The words cut deep because they reflected Maya's own fears about what she was becoming. Had she really spent so many years building a reputation for perfection that she'd forgotten how to be a soldier? "I've been thinking about what happened up there," Rodriguez continued, "and I think I know what went wrong. You've been carrying the weight of never missing for so long that you forgot something important. Missing isn't the worst thing that can happen to a sniper. What is? Not taking the shot when it matters most." Rodriguez stood up, his expression mixing disappointment with something that might have been pity. "Hassan's accelerating his attack timeline. Intelligence intercepts suggest he's moving the operation up by 2 weeks. 3 coalition bases, hundreds of American and Allied personnel, all because the ghost of Helmand was afraid to be human." After Rodriguez left, Maya sat alone in the mess hall, surrounded by the quiet conversations of soldiers whose lives continued to have purpose and meaning. She felt like a ghost in more ways than one, invisible, irrelevant, disconnected from the world of operational soldiers who still had missions to complete. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jake Morrison back at Camp Leatherneck. The text was brief but loaded with meaning. "Heard about Chapman. Remember what I said about training wheels? Sometimes you have to risk falling to learn how to ride." Maya stared at the message for a long time, remembering their childhood and the humiliation of being the only kid who needed training wheels at age 10. She'd been so afraid of falling, so terrified of embarrassment, that she'd clung to the safety of extra support long after she was capable of riding without it. Maybe she was doing the same thing now. That night, Maya made a decision that would either salvage her career or destroy what remained of it. She unpacked her rifle case and began cleaning the XM 2010 with meditative precision, each component receiving the kind of attention usually reserved for religious artifacts. The weapon was still perfect, every surface gleaming, every mechanism functioning with mechanical precision. The rifle hadn't failed her on the mountain, she had failed it. More importantly, she had failed everyone who depended on her to eliminate threats when the stakes were highest. Maya had spent 3 days wallowing in self-pity and professional doubt. It was time to remember who she was supposed to be. The next morning, she reported to Captain Park's office for her scheduled psychological evaluation. But instead of the defeated soldier who had left the previous session, Park found himself facing someone who radiated quiet determination and focused purpose. "You look different today," Park observed as Maya settled into her chair. "I've been thinking about what you said, about perfectionism becoming paralysis." "And?" "You were right. I've been so afraid of missing that I forgot why I became a sniper in the first place. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves." Park made a note, his expression carefully neutral. "What changed your perspective?" Maya thought about Rodriguez's words, about Jake's text message, about the 3 coalition bases that were now at risk because of her hesitation. "I realized that being perfect isn't the same thing as being effective. Sometimes effectiveness requires accepting imperfection." "That's a significant insight. How do you plan to apply it moving forward?" "I want to return to operational status. I want another chance to prove that I can be the soldier my unit needs me to be." Park studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing her words against his professional assessment of her psychological state. "Staff Sergeant, what you experienced on that mountain wasn't unusual. Many snipers go through periods of doubt and hesitation, especially after extended combat deployments. The unusual thing is how severely it affected your performance. Because I'd never experienced doubt before," Maya realized. "I'd built my entire identity around being perfect, so when I finally felt uncertain, I didn't know how to handle it." "Exactly. The question now is whether you can learn to function effectively while accepting that perfection isn't always possible." Maya met his gaze steadily. "There's only one way to find out." Park made several more notes, then set his pad aside. "I'm going to recommend that you be returned to operational status, but with conditions. You'll be paired with an experienced spotter who understands your psychological profile, and you'll start with lower-risk missions to rebuild your confidence gradually." "What about Hassan?" "Hassan is no longer your concern. Other assets are being deployed to address that threat." Maya felt a flash of disappointment, but she understood the logic. She'd had her chance and failed to take it. The mission would continue without her, handled by soldiers who could pull the trigger when lives depended on it. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." "Don't let yourself down," Park corrected. "That's what got you into this situation in the first place." Maya's return to operational status came with a new assignment and a familiar face. She found herself back at Camp Leatherneck, reunited with Jake Morrison, and assigned to a sector that had seen increased Taliban activity following Hassan's accelerated timeline. "Welcome back, Ghost," Jake said as she reported to the sniper section. "Heard you had some trouble up north." You could say that. Maya was grateful that Jake didn't probe deeper into the details. Their renewed partnership felt comfortable and familiar, a return to the professional rhythm they'd developed before her reassignment. "New mission parameters," Jake continued, handing her a briefing folder. "Taliban supply convoy moving through the Sangin Valley tomorrow night. Intelligence suggests they're carrying explosives and detonators, probably part of Hassan's accelerated attack preparation." Maya studied the mission details, feeling a familiar mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The convoy interdiction was straightforward. Multiple targets at moderate range, clear rules of engagement, minimal civilian risk. It was exactly the kind of mission designed to rebuild confidence gradually. "Range to target area?" she asked. 800 to 1200 meters, depending on their route. Good visibility, light winds forecast. Should be a textbook engagement. Quote. Maya nodded, though she could hear the unspoken message in Jake's tone. This was her chance to prove that Chapman had been an aberration, that the ghost of Helmand was still capable of operational effectiveness. It was also her chance to prove the opposite. That evening, as they prepared their equipment for the mission, Jake broke the comfortable silence between them. "Maya, can I ask you something personal?" She looked up from the rifle she was cleaning. "Shoot! What really happened up there? With Hassan, I mean. The official reports say you assessed the shot as too risky, but everyone who knows you is having trouble believing that. You've made riskier shots under worse conditions." Maya considered deflecting the question, maintaining the professional distance that usually existed between operational partners. But Jake had been there through her transformation from scared child to lethal sniper. If anyone deserved the truth, it was him. "I was afraid," she admitted quietly. "Afraid of missing?" "Afraid of not being perfect. For 73 shots, I'd been the sniper who never missed. The thought of breaking that streak, of proving that I was human after all, terrified me more than the thought of dying." Jake nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "That's fucked up, you know." Maya laughed despite herself. "Yeah, I'm starting to figure that out." The Maya Chen I knew as a kid was brave because she was scared, not in spite of being scared. Maybe you need to remember that version of yourself. The version with training wheels. The version who eventually learned to ride without them. As they made their final preparations for the mission, Maya found herself thinking about Jake's words. The scared little girl with training wheels hadn't been weak. She'd been human. The determination to overcome that fear, to push past the safety of extra support, had been the source of her strength. Maybe it was time to remember that lesson. The convoy interdiction mission began with a 3-hour movement through hostile territory, Maya and Jake navigating by night vision through terrain that looked like the surface of an alien world. By the time they reached their overwatch position, Maya felt the familiar calm of pre-combat focus settling over her. But underneath that calm, she could feel something else, a tiny flutter of uncertainty that would have paralyzed her a week ago. Tonight, she embraced it as a reminder that she was human, that perfection wasn't required for effectiveness. "Target acquisition," Jake whispered as the Taliban convoy entered their surveillance area. 4 vehicles, approximately 20 personnel. They're following the predicted route. Maya found the lead vehicle in her scope, her crosshairs settling on the driver with practiced precision. The shot was textbook. Clear visibility, moderate range, perfect conditions. The kind of engagement she'd completed dozens of times without hesitation. Her finger found the trigger, and for just a moment, the old fear tried to reassert itself. What if she missed? What if the perfect record was about to become imperfect? Then Maya remembered Rodriguez's words about comfort zones, Park's insights about perfectionism, and Jake's reminder about the courage that came from accepting fear rather than denying it. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and 800 meters away, the convoy's lead vehicle swerved off the road as its driver slumped over the wheel. Maya worked the bolt with automatic precision, finding her next target before the sound of the first shot had finished echoing through the valley. "Tango down," she reported, her voice steady and professional. "Engaging target 2." The second shot took out the convoy's rear guard, trapping the remaining vehicles between disabled trucks and forcing them into the open. Maya's rifle sang its deadly song 4 more times, each shot finding its mark with the precision that had made her legendary. When the silence returned to the valley, 6 Taliban fighters lay dead, and the convoy's cargo of explosives would never reach its intended targets. Maya Chen had returned to operational effectiveness, and the ghost of Helmand was back in business. But something fundamental had changed. As Maya broke down her rifle and prepared for extraction, she realized that the pressure of perfection was gone. She had accepted that she might miss, that she was human, that effectiveness mattered more than flawless statistics. Paradoxically, that acceptance had made her more dangerous than ever. "Nice shooting, Ghost," Jake said as they began their movement back to base. "Looks like the training wheels are definitely off." Maya smiled in the darkness, feeling lighter than she had in months. The scared little girl was still there, would always be there, but she was no longer in control. In her place was a professional soldier who understood that courage meant taking the shot, even when perfection wasn't guaranteed. The war was far from over, and Hassan was still out there planning his attacks. But Maya Chen was ready for whatever came next, armed with the most dangerous weapon of all, the willingness to be human. We're approaching the climactic moments of this epic tale, and the tension is at its peak. Creating stories of this scope and detail requires not just writing talent, but careful plotting, character development, and attention to every narrative thread. We've journeyed through nearly 40,000 words together, and I hope every moment has kept you engaged. If this story has drawn you in and kept you listening, please show your appreciation by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Share this epic with anyone who loves immersive storytelling, and hit that notification bell for more incredible adventures. Now, let's witness how everything comes together in these final, crucial moments. 3 days after Maya's successful return to operational status, intelligence arrived that changed everything. Hassan's planned attacks weren't scheduled for the following week. They were happening in less than 24 hours. Worse, the target wasn't 3 coalition bases as originally believed, but a single, devastating strike against forward operating base Chapman itself. Maya was cleaning her rifle in the armory when Major Williams burst through the door, her face grim with urgency. "Chen, gear up. We've got flash override traffic from Bagram. Hassan's moving tonight, and Chapman is the primary target." Maya felt her blood turn to ice. FOB Chapman housed over 800 personnel, including the elite special operations unit she'd worked with during her brief assignment there. If Hassan succeeded in his attack, the casualties would be catastrophic. "What's the intelligence picture?" Maya asked, already beginning to assemble her equipment. Intercepted communications indicate a coordinated assault using vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, followed by infantry infiltration through the base's eastern perimeter. Hassan will personally oversee the operation from an observation post on Hill 2847, approximately 1,500 meters from Chapman's main gate. Maya's tactical mind immediately began processing the implications. Hill 2847 was the same high ground that intelligence had identified as unsuitable for sniper operations due to its distance from potential hide sites and the complex wind patterns that made long-range shooting nearly impossible. "What assets are available for counter-battery?" she asked. "Everything that can fly or shoot is being diverted to Chapman's defense, but Hassan learned from our previous attempt. He's positioned himself beyond the effective range of conventional sniper systems and protected by counter-sniper teams that have been specifically briefed on your capabilities." Maya felt a chill of professional respect mixed with personal dread. Hassan hadn't just accelerated his timeline, he'd specifically planned his operation to neutralize the threat she represented. The ghost of Helmand had become predictable, and predictable snipers were dead snipers. "There's more," Williams continued. "Hassan's observation post is co-located with a Taliban propaganda unit that's planning to broadcast the attack live across social media platforms. He wants the world to watch Chapman burn." The psychological implications were staggering. A successful attack on FOB Chapman, broadcast in real time to global audiences, would represent a propaganda victory that could shift the entire trajectory of the war. It would also mean the deaths of hundreds of American soldiers, including people Maya knew and respected. "What are my orders, ma'am?" Williams handed her a sealed envelope marked with classification stamps that Maya had never seen before. You're being attached to a joint task force operating under direct authority from Special Operations Command. Your mission is to eliminate Hassan before he can coordinate the attack on Chapman. Maya broke the seal and read the orders, her eyebrows rising as she absorbed the details. She was being given carte blanche to operate with any available assets, unlimited logistical support, and authorization to engage targets using any means necessary. Ma'am, these orders authorize the use of experimental weapon systems. What exactly am I being asked to do? William's expression was grim. Something that's never been attempted under combat conditions. You're going to make a shot that exists only in theory, using equipment that's still in the prototype phase, at a range that violates everything we thought we knew about the laws of physics. Quote, An hour later, Maya found herself on a helicopter bound for Bagram Air Base, where she was introduced to Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the lead engineer for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency's Extreme Range Sniper System. Mitchell was a small, intense woman in her 40s whose enthusiasm for her work was both infectious and slightly terrifying. Staff Sergeant Chen, Mitchell said, leading Maya into a secure laboratory filled with equipment that looked more like science fiction than military hardware. I've been following your career with great interest. Your performance parameters suggest that you might be the only sniper capable of using our prototype system effectively. The prototype in question looked like a conventional rifle that had been redesigned by aliens. The XM 2015 Extended Range Precision System was nearly 6 feet long, with a barrel that gleamed like polished chrome and an optics system that resembled a small telescope more than a rifle scope. Effective range? Maya asked, running her hands along the weapon's exotic lines. In laboratory conditions, we've achieved accurate hits at ranges exceeding 3,000 meters. Under combat conditions, theoretical maximum range is 2,800 meters. Maya felt her pulse quicken. 2,800 meters was beyond anything she'd ever attempted, pushing into territory where bullets took nearly 4 seconds to reach their targets, and environmental factors became exponentially more complex. What makes it possible? Several breakthrough technologies, Mitchell explained, her voice taking on the tone of someone discussing her favorite subject. Electromagnetically rifled barrel for perfect spin stabilization, intelligent ammunition with microcourse corrections during flight, and an AI-assisted ballistic computer that can calculate solutions faster than human consciousness can process them. Maya lifted the rifle, feeling its perfect balance despite the exotic weight distribution. Through the advanced optics system, the laboratory wall appeared with crystalline clarity that made her regular scope seem primitive by comparison. The ammunition is particularly interesting, Mitchell continued, holding up a round that looked nothing like conventional sniper bullets. Guided projectiles with small fins that deploy during flight, allowing for minor course corrections based on real-time environmental data transmitted from ground sensors. You're describing a miniature missile, not a bullet. Quote, Exactly. The future of precision engagement isn't about perfect shots. It's about perfect hits. Maya spent the next 6 hours learning the XM 2015's characteristics, firing hundreds of rounds at targets set at increasing distances. The weapon performed like nothing she'd ever experienced, placing shots with mechanical precision at ranges that should have been impossible. But even as her confidence in the equipment grew, Maya felt the familiar flutter of anxiety building in her chest. This wasn't just about making a difficult shot. It was about using untested technology under combat conditions to eliminate a target whose death could save hundreds of American lives. The pressure was exactly the kind that had paralyzed her on Hassan's previous attempt. There's something else you need to know, Mitchell said as they concluded the training session. The XM 2015 requires a direct neural interface to function at optimal effectiveness. Maya looked at the small device Mitchell was holding, a sleek headset that looked more like a gaming accessory than military equipment. What does that mean? The rifle's AI system needs to sync with your brain's firing patterns to achieve maximum accuracy. It reads your neural impulses, predicts your intent, and begins calculating ballistic solutions before you've consciously decided to take the shot. The implications were staggering. The rifle wouldn't just be an extension of Maya's body, it would be an extension of her mind, capable of making calculations and corrections faster than human thought. Is it safe? Define safe, Mitchell replied with a scientist's clinical detachment. The neural interface has been tested extensively in laboratory conditions. but never under the stress of actual combat. There's a theoretical possibility of neural feedback or system overload. Maya stared at the headset, understanding that she was being asked to become a test subject for experimental technology that could either make her the most effective sniper in human history or leave her with permanent brain damage. How long do I have to decide? You don't. Hassan's operation begins in 8 hours. The helicopter is already spinning up for your insertion. The flight to the insertion point was conducted in absolute radio silence, the modified Black Hawk helicopter using terrain-following radar to navigate through mountain valleys at altitudes that seemed to violate the laws of aerodynamics. Maya sat in the cargo bay, the XM 2015 secured across her knees, trying to process the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. Her new spotter for this mission was Master Sergeant David Prophet Johnson, a legendary special operations soldier whose reputation for impossible missions rivaled her own. Johnson was a compact, weathered man whose eyes held the kind of thousand-yard stare that came from seeing too much combat across too many deployments. "First time using experimental kit in combat?" Johnson asked, his voice barely audible over the helicopter's engines. "First time using experimental kit, period," Maya replied. "You?" "Third time. The first two didn't end well for the test subjects." Maya decided she didn't want to know the details. "Any advice?" "Trust the technology, but don't depend on it. At the end of the day, you're still a sniper with a rifle. Everything else is just fancy equipment." The insertion point was a wind-scoured plateau 13 kilometers from Hassan's observation post, chosen for its concealment and clear lines of sight toward the target area. Maya and Johnson moved through the darkness with the patient precision of predators, carrying over 100 pounds of equipment each across terrain that looked like the surface of Mars. It took them 4 hours to reach their hide site, a natural depression in the rocks that offered perfect concealment while providing unobstructed fields of fire toward Hill 2847. As Johnson began setting up his spotting equipment, Maya assembled the XM 2015 with reverent care. The rifle went together like a precision instrument, each component locking into place with satisfying clicks that spoke of perfect engineering. When she activated the neural interface headset, Maya felt a strange tingling sensation as the system synchronized with her brain patterns. "Range to target 2,700 meters, Johnson reported, his voice tense with professional concentration. "Wind conditions are variable but manageable. I'm reading thermal updrafts from the valley floor and crosswinds from the eastern passes." Maya settled into her shooting position, the XM 2015's stock fitting against her shoulder like it had been custom-made for her body. Through the advanced optics system, Hassan's observation post appeared with startling clarity, despite the extreme range. She could see the temporary structures that had been erected on the hilltop, the communications equipment that would coordinate the attack on Chapman, and the armed figures moving between positions with military precision. Somewhere among those figures was Malik Hassan, the man who had killed her father and was planning to kill hundreds more American soldiers. "Target acquisition," Maya whispered into her radio. "Multiple personnel at the observation post, attempting to identify Hassan." Through her scope, Maya watched the enemy positions with patient intensity, cataloging faces and movements, while the rifle's AI system absorbed environmental data and began calculating preliminary ballistic solutions. The neural interface felt strange at first, a subtle presence in her mind that seemed to anticipate her thoughts, but gradually became as natural as breathing. "Movement at the primary observation bunker," Johnson reported. 3 military-age males, one matching Hassan's physical description. Maya's crosshairs found the figure Johnson had identified, a bearded man in his 50s, whose bearing and position relative to other personnel marked him as someone of authority. The facial recognition software built into her scope confirmed what her tactical instincts already knew. Malik Hassan was in her sights. But the shot was impossible by every conventional measure. 2,700 meters through mountain air, with variable winds and thermal effects that changed by the minute. Even with the XM 2015's advanced capabilities, hitting a man-sized target at that range required perfect conditions and flawless execution. Maya felt the familiar calm descending over her as she entered the zone, but this time it was different. The neural interface was amplifying her natural abilities, making her more aware of minute environmental changes, while simultaneously calculating solutions too complex for conscious thought. Through the scope, she could see Hassan moving between positions, occasionally stopping to peer through binoculars toward FOB Chapman in the distance. He was coordinating final preparations for an attack that would kill hundreds of people, and he was doing it with the confidence of someone who believed himself beyond the reach of American retaliation. "Wind report," Maya requested. "Variable crosswinds 8 to 12 knots. Thermal effects moderate and increasing with sunrise. You've got maybe 10 minutes of optimal conditions before the thermals make the shot impossible." Maya's finger found the trigger as the rifle's AI system presented her with a constantly updating ballistic solution. The neural interface was feeding her information faster than conscious thought: wind speed, air density, target movement patterns, optimal firing windows. But underneath all the technology, Maya felt the same uncertainty that had paralyzed her during the previous attempt on Hassan's life. What if the experimental systems failed? What if 2,700 meters proved to be beyond even her enhanced capabilities? What if she missed the most important shot of her career? For a moment, the old fear tried to reassert itself. The scared little girl with training wheels whispered about impossible shots and certain failure. But then Maya remembered Captain Park's words about perfectionism and paralysis, Rodriguez's insights about comfort zones, and Jake Morrison's reminder about courage in the face of uncertainty. She was going to take the shot. Maya's breathing slowed to nearly nothing as her heartbeat settled into its familiar rhythm. Through the neural interface, she could feel the rifle's AI system synchronizing with her biology, preparing to fire at the optimal moment between heartbeats. Hassan stopped moving, turning to face the observation bunker's primary scope. For just a moment, he presented a perfect target, stationary, clearly visible, unobstructed by equipment or personnel. Maya squeezed the trigger. The XM 2015 bucked against her shoulder with surprising gentleness, its advanced recoil system absorbing most of the weapon's violent energy. The guided projectile left the barrel at nearly 3 times the speed of sound, its tiny fins deploying during flight as onboard computers made microscopic course corrections. For 3.2 seconds, Maya's bullet flew through 2,700 meters of hostile mountain air, threading between wind currents and thermal updrafts with guidance from sensors that tracked its progress in real time. Then, Malik Hassan's head disappeared in a pink mist, and the ghost of Hellman had made the impossible shot. "Tango down," Maya reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Primary target eliminated." Through his spotting scope, Johnson watched the chaos that erupted on Hassan's observation post as Taliban fighters scrambled to understand what had happened. Without their leader's coordination, the attack on FOB Chapman would collapse into confusion and missed timing. "Holy fuck," Johnson breathed. "That was the most incredible shot I've ever seen. 2,700 meters in mountain conditions, and you took his head clean off." Maya was already beginning to break down the XM 2015, muscle memory guiding her hands while her mind processed what had just happened. She had made a shot that existed only in theory, using technology that pushed the boundaries of what was possible and eliminated a target whose death would save hundreds of American lives. More importantly, she had done it while accepting that failure was possible. The perfect record was no longer perfect. She had missed Hassan on their first encounter, but effectiveness had proven more important than perfection. As they began their movement toward the extraction point, Maya felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of herself. She was still the ghost of Hellman, still the sniper who rarely missed. But she was also human, capable of doubt and fear and uncertainty. And that combination had made her more dangerous than ever. The helicopter extraction went smoothly, lifting them away from the mountains as the sun painted the peaks in shades of gold and crimson. Below them, Hassan's observation post was already being overrun by coalition forces, the attack on FOB Chapman disrupted before it could begin. Maya had made the shot of her career, saved hundreds of lives, and proven that experimental technology could work under combat conditions. But as she settled back in the helicopter's cargo bay, she found herself thinking not about the successful shot, but about the one she'd failed to take. The little girl with training wheels was still there, would always be there, but she was no longer afraid of falling. Sometimes, Maya had learned, you had to risk the fall to remember how to fly. 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stood at attention in the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, wearing her dress blue uniform and the kind of expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. The ceremony was smaller than the media spectacle such events usually became, but the attendees represented the highest levels of the American military and intelligence communities. Secretary of Defense Patricia Morrison, no relation to Jake Morrison, despite his hopeful jokes, stepped forward to read the citation that would accompany Maya's Medal of Honor, the nation's highest decoration for valor in combat. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty, Morrison began, her voice carrying across the assembled dignitaries and Maya's family members who had flown in from California. Staff Sergeant Chen demonstrated extraordinary heroism during combat operations against enemy forces in Afghanistan. Maya's parents sat in the front row, their faces glowing with pride and barely contained emotion. Her father, a retired Marine gunnery sergeant who had served 2 tours in Vietnam, wiped away tears that he probably thought nobody could see. Her mother clutched a folded American flag, the one that had covered Maya's grandfather's casket after his death the previous year. Despite facing impossible odds and utilizing experimental equipment under combat conditions, Staff Sergeant Chen successfully eliminated a high-value target at a range exceeding 2,700 meters, preventing a coordinated attack that would have resulted in massive casualties among coalition forces. The citation continued for several more paragraphs, describing Maya's actions in the clinical language that military awards required. But the words couldn't capture the reality of what had happened on that mountain, the fear, the doubt, the moment of absolute clarity when she'd accepted that failing was possible but mission accomplishment was necessary. As Secretary Morrison stepped forward to place the Medal of Honor around Maya's neck, Maya found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the scared little girl who needed training wheels to the sniper who had made the impossible shot, every step had been necessary to become the person standing in this room. The medal was heavier than she'd expected, its weight settling against her chest like a physical reminder of the responsibility that came with recognition. Maya had become a symbol of American military excellence, of technological advancement, of the warrior spirit that refused to accept defeat. But symbols were dangerous things. They could inspire, but they could also imprison, creating expectations that no human being could sustain indefinitely. After the ceremony, Maya found herself in a reception room, filled with generals, politicians, and defense contractors who all wanted to shake hands with the woman who had made the longest confirmed kill shot in military history. The conversations were polite, but predictable. Congratulations on her achievement, questions about her future plans, subtle inquiries about whether she'd be interested in consulting opportunities when her military service ended. "Quite a journey from training wheels to the Medal of Honor," a familiar voice said behind her. Maya turned to find Jake Morrison, now promoted to Staff Sergeant himself, wearing his own collection of ribbons and medals. His presence was both comforting and jarring, a reminder of where she'd come from and how far she'd traveled. "Jake, I didn't know you were coming." "Wouldn't miss it. Besides, someone had to represent the people who knew you when you actually needed training wheels." Maya laughed, feeling some of the ceremony's tension drain away. Those were simpler times. "Were they?" Jake's expression grew more serious. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been carrying the weight of those training wheels for a lot longer than anyone realized." Before Maya could respond, Lieutenant Colonel Reeves approached, her own dress uniform crisp, with the kind of precision that marked career military officers. She extended her hand with the warmth that had replaced her earlier professional coolness. "Congratulations, Medal of Honor recipient Chen. Well deserved." "Thank you, ma'am. I couldn't have done it without the support of exceptional commanders." Reeves smiled. "Modesty doesn't suit you, Maya. You made a shot that redefined what we thought was possible. The tactical implications are still being analyzed by people with security clearances higher than mine." The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the DARPA engineer who had designed the XM 2015 system. Mitchell looked tired but excited, carrying a tablet filled with data that probably contained more classified information than Maya was cleared to see. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Mitchell said, "I wanted to thank you personally. The combat trial of the XM 2015 exceeded our most optimistic projections. You've helped validate technology that will save American lives for decades to come." Maya nodded politely, though part of her wondered if creating more effective ways to kill people was really the legacy she wanted to leave. The shot that had eliminated Hassan had been necessary, even righteous, but it had also opened doors to weapon systems that pushed the boundaries of what warfare might become. "What's next for the program?" she asked. "Based on your performance data, we're moving into full-scale production. The neural interface technology you tested is being refined for broader deployment. Within 5 years, every American sniper could have access to capabilities that were considered impossible a decade ago." Maya felt a chill at the implications. The neural interface had been strange and uncomfortable, creating an intimate connection between her consciousness and the rifle's AI systems. The thought of that technology being deployed widely raised questions about the nature of human agency in combat situations. As the reception continued around them, Maya found herself drawn to a quiet corner where she could observe the proceedings without being constantly approached by well-wishers and curiosity seekers. The metal around her neck felt increasingly heavy, its weight a reminder of expectations that seemed to grow with each passing minute. "Heavy thoughts for someone who just received the nation's highest honor," Captain Park observed, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. Maya accepted the drink gratefully. "Just processing everything, I guess. 6 months ago, I was facing a psychological evaluation and potential career termination. Today, I'm being celebrated as some kind of superhuman warrior. And how do you feel about that transformation?" Maya considered the question, sipping her champagne while watching the assembled dignitaries continue their networking and small talk. "Uncomfortable. The person they're celebrating isn't really me. It's some idealized version that exists more in their imagination than reality. What's the difference between the real Maya Chen and the idealized version? The real Maya Chen is scared sometimes. She makes mistakes, doubts herself, and needs training wheels longer than she should. The idealized version never misses, never hesitates, never shows weakness." Park nodded thoughtfully. Which version made the shot that killed Hassan? The question struck at something fundamental that Maya had been avoiding for months. Which version of herself had pulled the trigger on that mountain? The perfect sniper who never missed, or the human being who had learned to function despite fear and uncertainty? Both, I think, or maybe neither. Maybe I'm still figuring out who I really am. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Maya's parents, who had been making their way through the crowd with the determined patience of people who wouldn't be denied access to their daughter on such an important day. "Maya, sweetheart," her mother said, embracing her with the fierce love that only parents could provide. "We're so proud of you. Your father's been telling everyone who will listen about his daughter, the war hero." Maya's father, Master Sergeant William Chen, retired, stood with the ramrod posture that 26 years of Marine Corps service had burned into his bones. His eyes were bright with unshed tears as he looked at his daughter wearing the same uniform he had worn with pride for most of his adult life. "You did good, kid," he said simply, though the words carried decades of approval and love. "Your grandfather would have been proud." Maya felt her own emotions threatening to overwhelm her professional composure. The medal she wore was impressive, but her parents' approval meant more than any official recognition could provide. "I learned from the best," she replied, hugging her father with the kind of fierce affection that she rarely allowed herself to show. As the reception began to wind down, Maya found herself surrounded by the people who had shaped her journey from scared child to decorated soldier. Jake Morrison, who had inadvertently provided the motivation for her transformation. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves, who had challenged her to grow beyond her limitations. Captain Park, who had helped her understand the psychological foundations of her perfectionism. Each of them had played a role in her development, but Maya realized that the most important lessons had come from within, from learning to accept fear as a natural part of courage, from understanding that effectiveness mattered more than perfection, from discovering that the scared little girl with training wheels had never been a weakness to overcome, but a source of humanity to preserve. 3 months after the Pentagon ceremony, Maya found herself back where it all began, on a shooting range behind her childhood home in California, teaching her 8-year-old niece Emma how to handle a .22 rifle. Emma was struggling with the basics, her shots scattered across the target like confetti, frustration evident in every line of her small body. "I can't do it, Aunt Maya," Emma said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'll never be as good as you." Maya knelt beside her niece, seeing herself at that age, scared, uncertain, desperate to prove herself worthy of love and acceptance. But instead of pushing Emma toward perfection, Maya did something different. "Emma, let me tell you a secret," Maya said softly. "The best shooters aren't the ones who never miss. They're the ones who learn from missing and keep trying anyway." She helped Emma adjust her stance, corrected her grip, and guided her through the breathing techniques their grandfather had taught them both. When Emma's next shot hit the outer ring of the target, Maya celebrated as if her niece had just made the shot heard round the world. See, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep improving. As the sun set over the California hills, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her from training wheels to the Medal of Honor and back to the simple moment of teaching and learning. She was still the ghost of Helmand, still the sniper with 147 confirmed kills and counting. But she was also Aunt Maya, helping a scared little girl discover her own courage. The training wheels had come off long ago, but Maya had finally learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest strength came not from never falling, but from getting back up every time you did. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with a message from Jake Morrison. Saw your interview on CNN. Still the same Maya who needed training wheels, just with better aim. Proud of you, Ghost. Maya smiled, looking out at the sunset that painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, new opportunities to serve, but tonight she was exactly where she belonged, teaching the next generation that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and shooting anyway. The little girl with training wheels had grown up to save the world, one impossible shot at a time. Creating a story of this magnitude requires months of planning, writing, and careful narration to ensure every detail is perfect and every moment keeps you engaged. This has been the equivalent of a complete novella, crafted specifically for this format. If this epic story moved you, inspired you, or simply entertained you through this incredible journey, please show your appreciation by liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more amazing long-form stories. Share this with anyone who loves compelling narratives and has the patience for truly epic storytelling. Hit that notification bell to be the first to hear our newest content. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community and for joining me on this remarkable adventure. I'll see you in the next incredible tale.